Hi there, I'm Lily. Welcome to the Vital Horse podcast. I'm a veterinary surgeon passionate about what our animals' behaviour can alert us to. I focus on nurturing the innate nature of animals to address the deep roots of health, well-being and vitality. Our relationship with our horses is an inextricable part of this. I am guided by what they show me. Many people say, if only they could talk, but they can tell us so much and we can communicate back. This podcast is about you being able to help your horse fully by finding out what's going on, deciding how best to help, and then doing this ethically and effectively. In this way, we can investigate and treat behavioural signs and underlying health problems, pain, or dysfunction in our horses while actually improving our relationship with them. Let's find out how. In this episode, I am joined by Karen Rohlf of Dressage Naturally. I met Karen probably about 3 years ago and took her mastermind program for heart-centered horse professionals, which is now called the Transform Your Business Action and Support Group. Karen is the author and creator of Dressage Naturally. She is an internationally recognized clinician who is changing the equestrian educational paradigm. She teaches students of all disciplines and levels from around the world in her clinics and the Dressage Naturally virtual programs. Karen is well known for training horses with a priority on partnership, a student-empowering approach to teaching, and a positive and balanced point of view. She believes in getting to the heart of our mental, emotional, and physical partnership with our horses by bringing together the best of the worlds of dressage and partnership-based training. Karen's passion for teaching extends beyond horse training. Her For the Love of the Horse, Transform Your Business Action and Support Group is a result of her commitment to helping heart-centered equine professionals thrive so that horses may have a happier life in this industry. In this episode, Karen and I talk about the interconnectedness of horse health and happiness and the role our relationship with them also plays in this. We discuss the 3 pillars and 4 deep roots of my approach, which Karen helped me to identify through her action and support group, and definitely practices herself. This was a great conversation and I'm sure you'll enjoy it as much as we did.
All right. Okay, we're recording now.
Excellent.
All right, so Lily, I'm just going to jump on. I was like, it's going to be weird, like who's leading this conversation. So I'll just share that Lily reached out to me because she has a new podcast, which is called the Vital Horse Podcast, and said, hey, will you be a guest? And then decided we could like have it on each other's podcast. So I don't know who's leading what conversation, but welcome to my podcast, Lily.
Yeah, welcome to mine.
There we go. Well, I'm so happy when you reached out. We've gotten to know each other a little bit over the past couple of years, and I just love what you do. And so I'm excited to be part of whatever conversation you have dreamed up here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. The reason why I asked you for this, so it's only the 2nd episode, is because the whole theme really, the reason why I've called it the Vital Horse podcast in the first place is because as a vet, I would like to look at health as more than just the absence of disease. So I actually looked up some definitions of vitality and really it is what I'm going for. So, for example, the exuberant physical strength or mental vigor, a lively and animated character, the state of being strong and active, the power or ability to live, grow, and develop. So I think that really encapsulates well the way that I have kind of developed, and you helped me with this, my framework for my system. So when I was in your business program, mentorship program, you you taught us to identify what is our system, define it, put words to it. And it helped me hugely because I realized what it was I was doing. And then I've been able to use those different threads of the system to design ways of helping horse owners and horses. So if I run through what it was that my system that I came up with. So I've got three pillars of the sort of nature of my approach, and I call those attuned assessment, wholehearted decision making, and compassionate implementation. So that's kind of the attitude that I bring to how I approach problems in horses, and then and not just problems but also preventing. So this is a vital part of it. And then my four deep roots, which is kind of what when I think through health or dis-ease, whatever that is, whether that's maybe mental, physical, or emotional, in my mind it tends to fall into one of four categories, which isn't a sort of a conventional clinical approach, but I think it helps us to identify which avenue to go down. And the first one of those I call husbandry for happiness. So that's like the horse's lifestyle and our management interventions. The second one is movement medicine. So that's standing or resting and moving, posture and biomechanics, and also amount of movement that kind of overlaps with the lifestyle piece. Then there's cultivating comfort. So that's ensuring that they don't have physical pain, but also emotional and mental unease. And then the last piece is the relationship piece, and I call that communication, compassion, and consent. And partly because I've got into some cooperative care behaviours for helping when horses are quite scared of veterinary or husbandry interventions. So you popped up, you know, you were the first person I thought of, because there are things in all of these that that we can talk loads about. And
Yeah.
there were actually some recent podcast episodes of yours, for example, the Tour of the Temenos one and your performance story number 2, where I was thinking, oh my goodness, the relating back to these things. So yeah, that's why I thought it'd be great to record an episode and have it early as well. So I guess my idea was to go through some of those things and kind of bounce some thoughts off of each other.
I'd love that. And I mean, I hope people just like rewind what they just heard, because you just put down so much amazing stuff. And I know you've um, I'm so happy that if I played a role in pulling this out of you, because, when I think about veterinarians, I mean, that's a huge group of people, but so often veterinary care is sort of reactive, right? Something breaks and then you got to get it fixed, and something breaks and you got to get it fixed. And it's just so cool to see a veterinarian like you just like going really deep and looking at it in a much more holistic way. And so, you mentioned the transform your business support that I have. You were in like the mastermind, and now I have a program that's even easier for people to access. But like, this is exactly why I did it, because I'm not really a business person, but it's really for people like you, heart-centered people, because, looking at what the horse world needs, like, this is what the horse world needs: people like you to like thrive and understand the genius of what you're doing, and to pull it out of yourself and then be able to let people access it and benefit from it in many more ways than just coming in to vaccinate your horse or coming in to fix the wound. So anyway, so that, and then I just love the, again, the holistic view. So I just wanted to kind of before we get into the really into it, just kind of highlight that. I'm like, I feel like the proud mama. I'm like, this is why I made the business program. Okay, all right. So I've got that out of my system. Yeah, ask away.
Yeah. So I guess actually the first thing is probably to look at the deep roots, because then approach, if you need to change something within them, the approach will come when you make the change. So the first category is husbandry for happiness. And I know you have actually gone into this in detail in your episode Tour of the Temenos, but I thought it'd be great if we both talked about how we have found lifestyle to affect health and happiness of horses, because we actually both have quite similar setups. So my premises now is a rehabilitation facility on a track system, and
Mm-hmm.
horses live freely. They can come in and out of a covered barn area, and uh, and they have all sorts of enrichment pieces and things like that. And that I've found so many knock-on effects to, well, all sorts of things. So whether that is digestive health, uh, foot growth and alignment, dental health, definitely emotions and behavior, and actually, well, metabolic things, and then more sort of things that might seem to be more serious diagnoses can also be very much affected by the cognitive part of having this varied environment, the emotional part of having basically forage, freedom, and friends, and then the physical part of things like how we maybe affect their standing and moving posture and how much movement they do. So yeah, just an open question really on how you've found, because I mean I know that you come from a traditional background, and how you found the changes in your horse's happiness and also your horse's health. And I know there are a few risks with having horses living loose and freely, but you can talk about both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think with horses, there's risks no matter what you do, right? So they're just different risks. And so many people, I think, I, a lot of the traditional husbandry, well, some of it comes from that's just what people do. And a lot of it comes from really wanting to protect the horse. And then just that, the view of I'm going to protect it from certain things, but then you're not protecting it from other things, like all the things that can happen from a horse who's not grazing, who's not moving, who's not mentally stimulated or at peace with himself. And so it's kind of just like pick your risk. Right?
Mm.
And I think we all have
Absolutely.
to think that like nothing's going to be perfect, but choose your risks. And sometimes they're different with each individual. So I like to have my ideal, but then I have to look at any particular horse and what's their situation. So I think where I notice things happening the most is when I've brought a horse in to my place who has been in a stall 23 hours at least a day and coming from that lifestyle, because now this lifestyle is different. But here's what I don't do. I don't just take that horse and throw him out in the herd and get my camera out, you know, and go, this ought to
Yes.
be exciting. Um, so so noticing like the changes in that horse and the little steps of what he can handle. So horses that often when they come from that environment, you turn them out and then it looks like that they don't want to be turned out because they start freaking out after about a half hour and they get desperate and anxious until they get back in their stall. But to me, that's just mental illness. Or, that's not normal. That's just normal for that horse. So I do a whole progression of they can be in their stall and then they get out with, they can be turned out into a small paddock that with access to their stall. And then we extend the time and then maybe I close the stall door and they hang out there a little bit longer, but under supervision, then to another pasture that's further away. And by going through all those steps and seeing how the horse starts functioning differently and how they are in other aspects when they get to a point where they go, oh, I'm okay as a horse. And realizing like something I've noticed this last horse that I did this with, there was a moment where he had access to a stall, and then the paddock that he could get to from the stall was divided in two. And so, at one point he had access to the stall, one half of the paddock, and the gate was open. He'd go to the other half of the paddock. And I just watched him one day. He would stand for like a minute in one place, and then he'd walk to another place. He'd stand there, and then he'd walk to another place, not anxious, not stall, not fence walking. And then he'd go, and I'm watching him, and I go, he has not had this many choices.
Oh,
The only choices he had was which direction he was going to face in his stall. And it was literally like he's like, I can go here, and I
wow,
can go
yeah.
there, and I can go over here. Which one do I want? I don't know. This is kind of shady. Maybe. And I thought, then I thought of training. And what am I trying to do when I train? I'm trying to get a horse to learn something and think and figure out what I'm asking.
Yeah,
And if
absolutely.
if they're able to think and decide and problem solve and find their preferences, that's neurology happening. That's neural connections happening instead of just blankness. So it was so beautiful to watch him be happy about making all these decisions. And I thought that's a healthier brain.
Yes,
That's a
absolutely.
healthier brain.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. So, problem solving, um, maybe not ability, but almost confidence in themselves to start to try or offer just something, have an idea about something and offer it when you're during an interaction. So their time when they're not interacting with you, so it's so influential on the time when they are interacting with you. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And then not to mention when they get to the point where they can go out in the big pasture, the 10-acre pasture that has even more variety. And then bonus points when they're out on the 10-acre pasture with another horse, which we have done many steps, along the way to make sure that's a good match. And then to just watch them move and interact and practice boundary conversations. I've had other horses do big training with horses
Yeah.
that had no boundaries, issues. I'm like, go on the herd for a little while. And it doesn't mean they're going to get beat up. They get
Mm.
to talk horse. And then when I talk horse, at least, they're like, oh, that is how the world works. And it's been so powerful. So it I don't know, it maybe it seems subtle, but to me watching, it's not subtle at all. And they're
Mm.
limbered up, their legs aren't, there's so many positive reasons why it if you have a performance athlete, why it's better for them to be out moving and
Mm.
grazing and standing and eating like a horse.
Mm.
So it
Yeah,
just takes a little thought and a little creativity and a little consideration. Like I say, you don't just throw them out and go, well, that didn't work. I turned my horse out on 10 acres with a herd and now they're unsound. That's a bad idea. No, no. You just got to have some considerations and use some smarts on the way to it.
yeah, absolutely. And that's really important because, as a sort of a practical thing, if people want to change their system somewhat to go toward more towards this kind of thing, um, that's a really important aspect of it because, well, horses definitely need horse company. That's obviously a given, but any particular individual, it's just like it with people. We need human company. Um, but maybe we wouldn't want to spend all of our time with just anyone. And maybe sometimes, and you see this in different individuals quite clearly. Some of them like to spend a bit of time out from social situations, and others like to be in social situations a lot and interacting a lot. And I've got some youngsters, and the older ones, they sort of leave them to it, breathing a sigh of relief sometimes when they're playing exuberantly, and then the older ones can kind of get out of that space and not participate if they want to. That's a really important part of it.
Yeah, and even within a pasture, because I see so many pastures, it's like they clear the entire property, put up a perfectly square pasture, and
Yeah.
then put a horse in it. and it's with like one kind of grass and that's it. So it's not just space, but I think the variety and the different nooks and crannies. So like in some areas where my horses are turned out, I pay attention, like where's all the poop in the morning? Like where are they sleeping? Where are the lay down spots? And you just notice, so like they want to be tucked up into the trees, but kind of near the security light that's by the driveway. Isn't that interesting? Like they wanted a little light there. So I think having the variety so they can pick and choose. And so my horses all live out in different configurations based on their health and needs and personalities, but they all get a chance to interact across that. So the horse that are turned out over here with this group and the horses in this other group, there's some cross pollination playtime at different times. And then my barn's in the middle, so they have free access to it in the morning. It's just like barn party, and they can
Yeah.
kind of come and go. And the joke is, there's a few of my horses who like love the stall time. They're like, and we call it their special private place. And so they really want to come in and hang out in the stall, and they feel special, or they just go sleep. So they do some. I love that you said that because they do sometimes want this little protected, safe place where they don't have to deal with any other horses or for
Yes.
whatever reason they personally want that. So for me, I love the variety and I love to give my horses choices and to observe what they're doing. Like they even
Mm.
have like three different flavored waters at the end of the barn, and it's
I love
hilarious. You know, they'll go, and one of them makes a cocktail. She drinks like 3 sips of the electrolyte water, then a whole bunch of the apple cider vinegar water, and then 2 sips of the other flavored electrolyte water. And then she's done. But she will do that every single time. Like
That's
it's been the
brilliant.
tea a cocktail. Um, so yeah, I don't know where I got off on that, but yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I've also got a flavored water bar, and it's really interesting how sometimes they'll go for something really enthusiastically for a little while,
Mhm.
and then they're totally done with it for a while after that. And actually, this is a really good point. I know I was going to go through the deep roots first and then the approaches, but we keep coming back to the same theme of observing what they're doing, and that's actually the first pillar. So attuned assessment, it's all to do with making observations and then letting that inform, well, various things. So you might let it inform your interactions with them and your maybe your training approach, or you might let it inform what you do next with diagnostics if they're lame or something like that. But you also let it inform what you do about their lifestyle. So you watch for what they are doing and then determine whether that means maybe there are some unmet needs, or these things that they are doing are them really expressing their natural behaviors, which is indicating that this is really a thing that they do need
Interesting.
and to continue with it. So it really can help you inform on your lifestyle factors and husbandry approaches.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's such a good point. And I think that sometimes horses change too as they age. You know, I've
Yes.
had my horses are all with me, they're lifers. And it's interesting to see how some of them change or based on stuff that happens during their life. And I think that attuned assessment is so important just to get in the habit of really observing and not
Mhm.
just going down the row and like, yep, that's what this one gets, that's what that one gets. Because it yeah, just like us, we evolve and change, and life, life changes us.
Yeah. I have a recent example actually. So my horse Sonny, who is he's in the photo that I sent you for this, and he's really the reason for nurturing nature equine, because he presented me with some things that then I had to do some exploring. So um, he is incredibly demonstrative about everything, and he had a foot abscess just recently. And in the days leading up to it, he didn't show any signs of lameness, but I knew that something had changed. So it didn't necessarily mean that I actually did anything differently, because I didn't yet have enough information to make a change, but I
Mhm.
was gathering more. So he change the order in which he was walking along the track with the other horses, for example. It might not seem like anything. And then he was taking longer to eat his feed and doing some things with his lips that he doesn't normally do. And then he's really enthusiastic with any training session, and he was just a bit distracted. And all of these things made me know that there was something developing. And then about 3 days later, he was very lame, and luckily he's better now. But it's such a powerful thing to have a system where they can display behaviors, because it might have been something that I really needed to change something about in order to prevent it from getting much worse. In this case, it actually just had to drain, but it could be that you pick up something much earlier and sort of head it off at the pass, or that you are a little bit prepared for something that's brewing. So there's another a power of this sort of freer living, I suppose, and where they can display their natural behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example of that. Yeah, and if they don't have any freedom to do things differently, then I think it's harder. It's harder to know what's going on with them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think that's probably a good point to move on to the movement bit. And so there's lots to this. One part is the lifestyle part and how much they can move in which sort of situations, and maybe over different terrains, that kind of thing. But certainly you're a good person to talk to about the other movement side of things. So healthy biomechanics when we are interacting with them, as opposed to on their sort of downtime. Um, and I know it's a massive subject, but the things. So my take on this, where it relates to veterinary relevance, is that it's never made any sense to me to treat something in isolation from what the horse is going to go back and do. So if there's something habitual that they're doing that is resulting in a wear and tear injury, obviously they're not all wear and tear injuries. There might be an accident that isn't at all related to something habitual. But if it is a wear and tear injury, then if they get injured, then that may be something alerting us to the fact that there is something that we need to change, explore changing in their habitual movement. And that might be living freely, but it may well be that we are inducing some moving postures, or standing and being unable to heel while resting is the other piece to that. So the our training or riding as a form of physical therapy is has always interested me, for that reason, because I think it's important that we don't just give a joint injection, for example, and then not ask the question, where did this come from?
That's a huge point. And in me speaking with other vets, I usually ask them this question of like, do you ever get frustrated because you feel like you have to keep treating the same horse for the same things? And do you have how much do you feel like the training is the thing? And, if a lot of them will answer, sort of not quite honestly, but if you have a good relationship with someone and they really speak honestly, they often will say, "Oh yeah, I've got some barns I go to. It's always the same injuries on all their horses. Like there's themes. It's obvious enough that, but then they don't feel like it's their place, right? So that's not, it's
Yeah,
like stay in your lane, right? But I this is why it's so important to talk about, because I think there needs to be a way to talk about this without it feeling it's just like looking at the data in front of you. Like, hey, he keeps pulling a suspensory.
yeah.
Here's some things that could cause that. And, anyway, so I think it's good to open up that conversation without it being like, you're wrong. But yeah, I mean, we have such a huge influence on horses when we're training them. And even in the like healthy biomechanics department, you can find systems where it's very precise. And, if you get it, it's like the most refined, like Pilates ballerina lessons. And like, if you get it just right, perfect, you can control every little bit and it'll work. But the chances of not being perfect, but trying to be, the risk of then getting it being sort of restrictive and trying to make a shape happen when it's not ready to happen, the risk of that is high. So for me, like I think about, I want harmony, I want freedom, I want balance. I want the horse to tell me where he feels the most free. And then thinking about it holistically, like what affects the posture of the horse and the way of going? Everything.
Yeah.
What affects the posture? Everything. The way the horse is feeling, is he confused? There's a posture of confusion,
Absolutely.
right? You can like imitate a confused person right now. I
Yeah.
just tilted my head and furrowed my brow. There's a posture associated with fear. There's a posture, with boredom. So for me, it's like eliminate all the things that are getting in the way of a horse feeling balanced and free in their movement. And then with posture, we just get used to what's normal. So I just start going, hey, let's look at some other choices of how you could move. Like, you can move your shoulders over here or over there and then leave them alone. And you could shift your weight this way or that way. And play with it in that way, where number one, well, this is probably number two, but one of the points is when I ask my horse to change their balance or their speed or whatever it is I'm asking them to change, like how good is that conversation? Right? Because a lot of times people will ask their horse to move their shoulder. It moves a little bit, but not all the way. And now they're stuck with their hand crossing over midline with a tight rein, holding the shoulder there, or equivalent, with the leg. So if you're asking your horse to change something, a body part, and they only change a little bit and the rest goes into defensiveness and brace, like that doesn't count. Like you didn't do it. So the quality of the communication, so the mental emotional part, the health and happiness of the horse arriving to the scene, then the quality of communication, and then you play with possibilities. And my idea that so much of what I teach is based on is somewhere there's a certain relaxation, energy, and balance where the horse goes, oh, that feels nice. I can move freely then. And whatever that place is, and where the horse breathes more deeply, relaxes his top line, becomes more rhythmic, like all those wonderful things we want to have as a baseline, they start offering that. And we're not using any aids to maintain it because it actually feels good to the horse. And we might need to remind them, hey, don't forget, you might want to shift your weight that way. And then they go, thank you. And they're in that place. Like that to me is the beginning. Then from there, okay, now let's get out our wisdom of biomechanics and say, that horse needs some straightening exercises. And probably if he carried his pole up just a little higher, it will make the whole system work better. Or, this one needs to do some shoulder in left medicine to build
Mm.
the, right muscles. But I find if we play, if we observe our horse, open up some possibilities with really high levels of communication, meaning the horse goes, sure, I'll do that, and gives it a try, we can get 80% of what we need easily, like
Mm.
with freedom and balance and no force, no restriction, no contortion. And then we can build on top of that because I feel like injuries happen the most when we are trying to put the horse in a certain shape. And then if they can't do it for some reason, then they're going to contort and compensate. And then horses are amazing because they don't want to tell you that they're not feeling well. Like you have to really look, which is
Mhm.
the attuned assessment, I think is brilliant. They'll kind of be like, no, I'm okay, I can do it. Now, when something starts getting injured, it might not even be the root cause, but it's like you got to peel through all these compensations. You don't even know what's going on. So um, it it complicates things when you try to force things to look like they're working when they're not. So that's where I build it on the happy horse, the harmonious connection, high quality communication about changing certain things like energy and balance, or key things, and then listen to the horse when the horse says, that feels good to me, I feel free. And as much as experience as I have, Lily, like rehabilitating movement of horses, I still will do it through experimentation. I might have an idea going in, but I am regularly surprised by, like, whoa, I never would have thought that moving the shoulder to the left when he already feels like he's dumping on the left, but moving the shoulder to the left helped. Like, there it is. It worked. Yeah. So that was a long
Oh, I love
ramble.
it.
Don't
Yeah, I
get me
love
started.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And so some really important things that you were just saying there for me. One is that everything affects posture. And a really good thing to remember, well, you were talking about sort of emotional states there. So emotion certainly affects posture. And this is how we come to link all of these things that I talked about, the four deep roots, because they're all so intertwined. And also, intention affects posture. And you can't really, so the horse has to do the exploration with you in order to get to some different possibilities. And the injury thing of where we're trying to contort into a particular shape or whatever, the other part to that is repetition, too much repetition of a certain thing. And I think the exploration and the play bit is so powerful because not only are we avoiding the drilling part, you can sort of do as much as is needed, I suppose, because you're doing a bit of a call and response, a feel based thing, and then also um, the the vibe, the spirit in which they are doing that is different. It's as opposed to contorting into a shape.
Yeah.
And there's something else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I keep going off in all sorts of directions,
I
having
know. I can see the brain firing. There's just sparkles going on. Yeah, I think with the repetition, um, you know, as a dressage trainer whose most used sentence used to be one more time. Just one more time. This one will be we'll get it this time. The drilling effect. And so when I play now to try to find something, it has to be playful. It's an experiment with playfulness and curiosity, going, where is it? Like, where is it? Where is it? And it might take a little bit to get to the spot that we're trying to find, but we want to do it sort of efficiently, but playfully efficient. And then when we start, so let's say I play around, I muck around, I'm like, oh, there's there's my working trot or whatever it is. Then I'll kind of have a little pause there and like, let's soak that in. Like, that's what we found. And I'll kind of think to myself, how long did it take me to get there? I wasn't really strengthening that. It just was, I took me there. And now I can go, okay, can I repeat this? What did I do? Okay, I asked them to speed up, and then I shifted the shoulder, and then and so then so I'm doing a lot of deconstructing and trying to find the answer. And then my next goal is to try to find what I call first step, best step. It's like, okay, now can I, from a rest, go, I'm going to look for that thing I was just trying to get. Can I pick them up, playfully experiment again, and then get it sooner and get it sooner? So in this stage, I'm not physically maybe strengthening my horse so much, but I'm getting really good, like a little masterful ninja at being able to find this place that I'm looking for. Now, when I can find it easily and quickly, and the horse is actually seeking it because they agree, like, whoa, that does feel better. And it's so easy. Now I can begin the process of repeating it more. And now I'm building strength, I'm building stamina, I'm building coordination. So instead of doing it again and again and again and again, try to make it happen. I'm taking it apart, deconstructing, playing with it, rewarding, getting better at finding it easily, and then build that. So we're strengthening the muscles of balance and freedom. Or, if you're doing gymnastics, you're strengthening the muscles of a half pass offered with ease. Yeah, let's do that in more repetitions in a smart way that builds them their strength and stamina, not just forcing it one more time, contorting it one more time, pushing it so that they have to contort even more to try to protect themselves because they're telling you they can't do it. And now you're just you're strengthening the muscles of defense and contortion.
Yeah, I love that. So there is a need for the repetition, but there's a different feel to that and a different
The
way of
intention.
different
Oh, come
intent.
on, let's find it versus, oh, just keep your head there.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I love that there's so many parallels with so with my attuned assessment approach to the other thing, it's almost as if your thinking may have influenced mine. So another thing that I do with my attuned assessment approach is to try to make sure, and this is quite difficult to do sometimes, it's a discipline, try to make sure not to put too many interpretations onto things that I'm observing while I'm doing the observing, because it can lead to a bit of tunnel vision and confirmation bias, and also acting quickly on something that's, I mean, obviously sometimes you do have to do that, but I try to be more in a mindset of gathering information and then testing it out. So, you know, so one of the things that I do with distance observations is I use food stations or scent stations sometimes, and you can do that for all sorts of purposes. So you can do it to evaluate their emotions around eating, for example, or you could set up more of a course that's a little bit more requires a bit more variation in their movement, and then you can observe they never really bend that right hock or something like that, and then you haven't got a diagnosis for sure, of course, and you can't even say they are stiff in their right hock yet. Then you have more digging to do. So it's like there's a parallel when it comes to a communication aspect. What's happening here, and then we play in different areas and figure out what it is that that sign is showing you. And then the other thing that you said, which leads actually on very well to the cultivating comfort route, is about them not necessarily wanting to show you if they're uncomfortable or in pain somewhere. So the other part to my attuned assessment approach is a hands-on evaluation, but it's got two-way communication it's embedded in it. So what I started figuring out was that if I acknowledged, so this is the attunement part, if I acknowledged an animal's very subtle signs of concern, or actually of anything, any of their subtle signs, and then waited, they would start to show me more. And sometimes that takes lots of sessions, so it may not be, it doesn't necessarily work in like a 15-minute consult slot always, but sometimes it does, sometimes it's amazing. And horses are so expressive, even if they're being subtle. So once you're looking for it, and it's also quite amazing exploring in each individual horse which sequences of signs that they tend to use and what that might be leading to next. And so then you can reach an interpretation about that. And there's two spin-offs of that with pain. And one, so I say this definition a lot. The International Association for the Study of Pain definition of pain is that it is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience, not just neurons firing. The emotional experience is embedded in there. And it's associated with the actual or potential tissue damage. So you don't actually have to have any tissue damage for there to be pain present. And the emotional part of it really affects that. So this attuned examination of a horse's body sometimes they will show you where they're uncomfortable a lot more clearly when they are aware that you are aware. And sometimes it's actually therapeutic as well because they let go of some of the emotional aspect to their discomfort. So the cultivating comfort bit is also about trying to ensure that they're not living in any kind of pain, grumbling pain or worse, and also emotional unease. And that's so enmeshed together. So if a horse has got a health condition that is painful, alleviating that might actually involve us changing our interaction with them and also stress factors in their lifestyle. So yeah, that's a
that's really cool. I mean, that the pain, I'm sort of fascinated by the pain emotional, because the emotional state can really change the experience of pain. I mean, I've
yeah,
experienced that and seen it with horses too. Like I know because I'll come in from the barn and my husband's like, "Where'd you get that bruise?" I'm like, "I don't know." You know,
yeah.
like I was having fun, so I didn't even feel it as pain. But if I anyway, um, I've also had horses. Like I want to talk a little more about the sign comfort and what you were saying about that just the noticing it can sometimes alleviate it. So I have a moving massage technique, but also where I just feel for any discomfort and then just wait. I say send them love and help. If they release, then I disappear. Probably related a lot to like Masterson method or just light touch technique, where if I'm touching my horse or sometimes even looking at them and I see them
Mm,
react, that I can just be there and like say and just let them know like, hey, I noticed that. What
mhm,
is that? What can we do with that? And a lot of times they'll do big releases and so maybe it's a place that's not necessarily injured, but they're just holding tension. I mean, maybe that's why and can just go away. But I've had some horses sometimes be really obvious with telling me like, hey, like my mare Solana, like, hey, lady, like, brah, and like really big, just like bite, and then you know, biting at me, and I'll just go. I usually just wait, and I go, okay, I see that. I gotcha. And then we approach again. She's like, okay, well, it's not, and it'll be less. She'll kind of let me in, but it's a big sign on
mm,
the way in. And if
yeah.
I tell her I notice, then it softens a little bit.
Mm,
And this is just with, I don't think big injuries, but just sort of her daily, how her body feels on any particular day.
mhm.
Um,
But
I
even
don't know
with
if there's a question in there, but
yeah, well, even with
yeah, I
big,
mean, just figure. Oh, sorry.
it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's a little bit of a delay. um, I was going to say that even with injuries, you can. There's a bit of a so there's two ends of a spectrum, I think. Um, you can have a numbing effect from being in a really heightened nervous system state, sympathetic nervous system state, just after you've been injured, and the adrenaline is actually blocking your pain perception. And then there's a middle bit where there's all sorts of nervous system states. There's a sort of a spectrum of nervous system state in which you can feel the pain. But I think the thing with alleviating, so even if it is actually tissue damage, not just tension, um, there's a point where the emotional experience and maybe the part of the sensory experience of the pain um, is more copable with by the horse in that state. So it's because sometimes so horses have different levels of discomfort around discomfort, and maybe that on some levels it's a personality thing, but in some situations it's actually that they're already they're close to overflowing already. So they're close to a threshold of not coping. And then having that pain is tipping them over the edge. And if we might not be able to take away all of those factors ever or at once, we might be able to eventually. But just taking away some layers goes a long way towards making them more comfortable. And in a practical sense, this might look like something like if your horse is injured and on box rest, for example, doing some games with them or something, and they have a different emotional state for that period of time, and it's almost a little bit like exploring the movement possibilities as well. It's like exploring different nervous system state or emotional state possibilities, and generally the body, I'm really impressed by how the body has this innate wisdom, and sometimes it gets a bit stuck and you do just need to show it a different possibility. And I know you were talking about that actually with so your horses having like their playtime when they when they may not have a lot of possibilities because of resting as a result of injury or something like that.
Yeah, I'm really big on just in general having the strategy of figuring out what can you do,
Mm.
right? So no matter what your limit, like what can you do, and playing with that. So whether it's just games standing still, touch the target, or different things like that, or maybe it's just doing something walking in the stall, or what can you do? I built a little rocker for my horses, so
Mhm.
like the ones who can't do much moving, like put Atomic up on this rocker thing and he works it like it's, I don't like he's at the gym, and he'll
That's
get a
great.
sweat going of like just
Wow.
rocking his posture back, and I can play with extending his neck while he is, because he has these chronic tendon injuries. But I think the through through giving his body different possibilities of what can he do, even if there's stuff he can't do, and then, like you said, the emotional states. Like I can play with him until he feels satisfied, like he's not frustrated,
Mm.
from standing in the stall, and even just coming out in the barn at night and just opening the stall door so he can walk from the stall into the aisle and hang around and get into things he's not supposed to get into, and he thinks that's funny. And we can play little games, just yeah, give them the as much sense of being okay, instead of just being a global thing of like, well, now your tendon's injured, so you have to stand in a square box and that's the only thing you get to do. So
Mm.
I'm just huge on what can I do. If I can't do X, I'm gonna do, and I can do Y, let's do Y. And let's see
Yeah.
what other things we can do. I wanted to ask you one thing, to kind of go back to something you said about with the assessment, about gathering information and testing, and you mentioned food stations and scent stations. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because like what's happening there? Because you said, oh, I can notice they're not bending their hock. Is it just to create some movement, and movement that you can, like, are you trying to cause specific movements by where you're,
Yeah.
like, paint a little picture?
Yeah. Yeah, you can design the station setup for sort of the question that you want to answer, really. So uh, I normally start with between 3 and 5 different stations in a space. With just one horse is it gets a little bit chaotic with more than one, but you can just do it as an enrichment thing as well. So if I was trying to ask a question, trying to answer a question about how do they feel about food, then I might have some different sort of level of values of different types of food, and I would be mostly observing what are their emotions around the fact that it's here, and are they are they trying to hoover it down, or do they explore and that kind of thing? Do they attack a hay net, or so those kinds of questions. Then if I was trying to look at how they are moving, then I might design it more. I'd have the food or the scent as the interest to drive them from one station to another, because I'm trying do this distance observation as opposed to interacting with them, in case that's changing anything about the way that they're choosing to move or the way that they feel about the situation. So you could, for example, have a food station that has a pole in front of it, and you might notice that they specifically avoid stepping over a pole with a particular limb, or they avoid the pole like the plague and they go around it, or that they just go straight over it and they knock it with one foot, or they go straight over it and they clear it very easily, and all sorts of things like that. You could have a slightly different surface in front of like a rubber mat or something in front of a food station, and some horses who they feel they maybe have not had a huge variety of proprioceptive information, maybe looking like they really need to stabilize themselves on a different surface. You could have even a step upwards, and you might notice that they're quite stuck in their withers or something like that. So yeah, you can design the stations to answer the questions that you're looking for. And the other one actually, which is really fun, is how do they learn, and maybe what are their dominant senses. So you could have a station where they need to get to the food by moving something out of the way that makes a little noise, or can they work out that they need to uncover this particular food station. I had a really great conversation with someone who said that they'd put they'd had a food station which was a bit of a puzzle, and they actually did have their oh no, wait, what, I think it was, they would, that's right, they would usually have their horse online for any kind of session, but they had the horse loose and they were just observing from a distance, and it was to answer questions about how does he learn, and he couldn't figure out the food puzzle, and he took himself off to the edge of the arena and started eating grass, quite sort of tearing at the grass in a very distracted and slightly frustrated way. And she said that she really, really wanted to go and help him, but she just carried on watching. He went back after maybe 30 seconds of doing that. He went back to the food puzzle and he solved it very, very quickly. And she said it's really interesting because normally if he's online, he does this behavior of getting a bit angry, and maybe part of that might be pulling away towards the arena fence. And actually, in those situations, what he wants to do is he needs a minute.
He needs to step outside and have a
Yeah,
cigarette.
yeah.
Some horses
Think
eat grass
through.
like they're chain smoking. Like,
Yeah,
that's his way of thinking. Very cool.
yeah. So
What
yeah,
a
it's amazing the kinds of things that you pick up, and then you can use
Yeah.
that to help you in that individual horse's case. If maybe they're having a bit of difficulty with something, actually what they need is a couple of minutes. You know, they just don't ask anything of them for a couple of minutes, and
Yeah.
they might need to go and eat grass, or and then in other cases you may need to present it in a different way. And there are some
Mhm.
horses that will not give up with a food puzzle. They don't want to have any time out. That would be even more frustrating. They're like, I know I can get this.
That's so funny. That reminds me of I love that example. Like, yeah, just I taught Atomic, who's my special needs horse right now, just to touch a target. I have a little board that I use, and then I started playing, find it. So I hide it, right? So I move it, and then he has to go. So, but it starts out as just, can I move it where he can see it, and is he willing to walk over there to touch it to get the treat? And then I can make it increasingly difficult, hide it, put it somewhere where he can't see it, and then make sure he doesn't see where I went. And then
Mm.
can he just hear the word and cue and know to go get it? And so then I've been playing, he's amazingly good at it. But I started playing that with different horses. And the one horse that I got most recently, who was, the story given to me because he had problems and blah, blah, blah. And the one that I told you about, like walking around and realizing he now had choices. Well, I was playing with him this game. I call it the Find It game. And it was almost like he had, what's it called? Like object impermanence. Like as soon as he couldn't see it, game was over for him. And he was just like, okay, what else are we doing? And I had to like really like watch, here it goes. I'm going over here. I put it 10 feet away. It's over here. See it? And then he would pretty ambitiously go to it. But if he couldn't see it, it was done for him.
Mm.
Where Atomic, we can be playing that game. I can hide it somewhere he doesn't see, let him out of the stall. He can like start to look. Then he can go get a drink of water for a while,
Yeah,
come back, and then pick up the game and go keep looking for it. And he won't
that's
give up until
amazing.
he finds it. But like with Teo, I realized like, wow, here's a horse who had training problems. And like if you didn't let him see every step and build it incrementally so he could put together that maybe if he moves a couple steps, he can find it. He just gave up. And
Mm.
not only gave up, but he was like, it went out of his mind. Like he was just like, now what do we do? Are we cuddling? And like, so it's, I love that game because it's the same game I play with every horse, but to watch, you know, what are the horses that can really go for it and what are the horses that give up? What are the horses that need more steps? Do
Mm.
they get frustrated or do they just forget what you were doing? Anyway, it's fascinating. So I love that gathering and testing idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and it shows how it really isn't a one size fits all or a sort of a recipe kind of thing for every horse. You might have a sort of a maybe a plan, an outline of a plan, but the way that you implement it has to change depending on the way that horses learn and remember things and problem solve.
Hmm. I think it's
Yeah.
so helpful too for you know, horses that are just really in a training program because that's often that's all that's the only time you're observing the horse. And then to, you know, watch him in the pasture and like the horses who always have the same leg back and then like
Mm.
go forward and always end up with their left front leg way back and their right front foot way stretched out. And to be able to look at that and say, you know, did you know like this is
Yeah.
right in front of us, like that's happening. It's like, oh no, that doesn't affect the riding. Like it's absolutely there. Or just to be able to see, you know, he drags his toe over the pole every single time on that left hind leg.
Yeah.
And if you're not observing the horse in that circumstance, and then it's easy for people to not be defensive about their own, say, riding skills or something, right? It's like this is just what's happening. That same
Mhm.
horse that I was just telling you about that didn't have the choice and who gives up easily when he doesn't see the answer. Also, when I got him and watched him roll, he can't lay down properly. He goes down rear end first,
Mm.
and it's quite awkward looking for him. um, when I asked the people I got him from, like, has he always laid down like this? And they said, like what? And I
Mm.
thought in that moment, they have never watched that horse lay down.
Mm.
And it's bizarre. I mean, so, but these are all pieces that help me put the puzzle together of, I don't think I need to ride this horse. He's telling
Yeah.
me signs, and I'm seeing some evidence just observing him. Like, there's something really off in this horse. And anyway, so I think the gathering and testing and taking ourselves out of it and going, look, I set up this puzzle and here's what we're seeing is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. That actually brings me to a really it segues well to one of the things that I wrote down um, when I listened to your performance story number 2, and it's the it was the thing that you said about um, well, I'm sort of paraphrasing, but it was uh, your commitment to your horse. What do they need and how are they feeling, as opposed to a specific outcome or sort of a performance goal? And that brings us really well to the fourth deep root, which is the communication, compassion, and consent bit. And the way that I see this interacting with all of the other pieces is partly it is what emotional state are they in, or can they enter into, and also how can we have conversations with them that serve us and the relationship and the horse, of course, as opposed to just some outcomes or performance goals. Now that has been a quite a difficult thing to achieve in some cases with interventions that horses are not keen on. So the needle shyness stuff, for example, how can we present something to a horse? It would be great if we didn't have to broach the subject if it's something that they are really not keen on. So I had this, how on earth can I try and make something that's unpleasant more neutral? I don't think that we can, it may not be realistic to make it actually pleasant, but how can I ensure that they still are understanding the process and still feel safe? And that has led me to exploring all of these two-way communication things where the horse can cue me and say, I'm giving you the green light to go ahead, or please give me a minute and pause. So with the cooperative care stuff, that's one place where it definitely affects very strongly. And I mean, I don't know, there's a bit of a debate about using the term consent in animals, but I definitely, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because I definitely think that they, we can, of course, set up communication, and there are definitely situations where they are not giving us permission.
Mm-hmm.
And we do need to be careful of cases where it may seem like they're giving us permission, but actually they are more in a learned helplessness state. But I
Mm-hmm.
really feel like there are situations where they are giving us permission. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that because I think you definitely work in that space as well.
Yeah, it's such a cool subject. I mean, we could do a whole conversation about this because I think it's complex. And you brought this up in a really beautiful way because it is complex. Like I was thinking about when I was like washing my horse's face. So there's, sometimes they're just like, I don't like it. And, I can train them, put your head down, deal with this. And we could easily get them into learned helplessness with it. And I'm thinking, there's things that happen to me that I don't like, and I have to be able to say I don't like them. They might still need to be done. And so how do we go like, listen, I know this isn't comfortable, but let's just get this done in a way that it's not too bad. And then how can I prepare to make it better? But there's some things I feel like I can teach her to keep her head down. She might not ever like the feeling of water on her face. But could we do it in a way that feels fair? It's
Mm.
like, I know it's not great, but okay. And she's not going to be offended and she's not going to feel violated by it. And there's always things I can do, like a different sponge or warmer water. And I'm always trying to think, I'll try to make it as comfortable as you can, but can there be an arrangement where it's like, you're saying it's not okay, not comfortable, you don't like it, but you're still choosing to cooperate with me. And I think in that space, and that sometimes I'll do it, I'll be like, I know, I know. And, and sometimes I'll make a thing when I'm doing their face. I'm like, you could put your head down, but stick your nose out because I know if you stick your nose out, the water will run behind your eye. Or I take
Yeah.
a little towel and I roll it up. It's like a spa. We have a big joke. It's like the Karen spa for their facial. I roll a little towel up. I put it right above their eyes so that if there's any drips, they don't go in their eyes. And then they're kind of like, yeah, that's better. Because I figured out it was the chance that the drip might go in the eye that was causing the problem. And if I saw that. So there's, and that's more than just keep your head down because I said so and going to learn helplessness. Like there's a conversation there. Um, it really feels like it's a different conversation with every horse and listening to them. And I'll give one example, and I'd love your take on this. So Solana, again, my very expressive mare, which is fine. I want them to express themselves. Otherwise, how are we going to know? But so blanketing. And here in Florida, sometimes it's still warm in the evening, but then it can get freezing at night up here. So there's often times where I'm putting the sheet on and they don't know that it's going to get colder. And they're reasonably telling me, this is a bad idea. Why are you doing this? I don't want my blanket on or my sheet on. And so doing this dance with Solana and it gets to the point where like, listen, honey, I hear you. I have checked that the blanket fits you. There's no rubs. I promise I'm checking. I hear you, but I think I'm pretty sure that this is not hurting you. It's just you don't prefer it.
Mm.
But can we work with this? And then And then I thought, okay, we have to have another thing to do. So I taught her to touch things, right? So wherever I am, I can touch something, I go touch, and she knows to touch whatever I just touched with her nose. This has changed everything. So she might come up, pin her ears or something. I wait. I go, I hear you. Can you touch it? And I just go, can you touch that? And she'll start touching it with her ears forward, looking for cookies, even nickering while I put her blanket on. And then I make sure I do it really politely. I don't fling it so that the straps accidentally hit her knees on
Mm.
the other side. I put it on as, I do everything as nicely as I can. And what's really cool now is sometimes um, I'll approach with the blanket, she'll start touching the thing, but it's not like, oh, I have to touch the thing. And she's like working me for cookies and she's in a great mood while I put the sheet on. This is all at Liberty, right? So she can
Yeah.
walk away if she really wants to. So having said that, I'd love to hear your take on, like, because that's not pain, that's sort of preference. Now, it might have been pain if there was a rub or the blanket didn't fit her well and it was, so I look at that, but how does that relate to your interaction with them around, pain and discomfort and
Yeah.
uncomfortable procedures?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so wow, there's so many things in there. One thing that struck me about that that I just wanted to say before I forget it is I think part of them giving us that cooperation in circumstances where maybe they would prefer not, but they'd still do grant us the permission, maybe after a little conversation, is that is what we tend to do in our relationship in general. So we're coming from a relationship place where they are kind of trusting that that's what we're how we're going to present things and that they do have a voice in that. So that kind of struck me when you said that. When
Mhm.
it comes to looking for whether there might be a pain or discomfort component to something, it is the observing and then testing out theories that I think is important, and to ask the question. So this might be going a bit. I mean, I'm not qualified to talk about human psychology, but just to make sure that we're open to the possibility, what well, asking the question, because it may be that you really don't want it to be the answer that there is pain there. And sometimes it can be tempting, therefore, to not ask the question, could there be pain there? So keep on, asking that question. And so if they're expressive, which is definitely what we want, I would much prefer it if a horse feels free enough to be expressive and tell me things. One is the kind of the persistence of the response when we're acknowledging it that would make me suspicious. This is not just in this moment. This is a consistent theme, and then maybe it's consistent if we try presenting it in slightly different ways. So I love that of giving something else to kind of giving the targeting behavior, because if that was consistently then still not working, then I would have more of a suspicion that there was
Right.
maybe an underlying pain thing going on. And the so she's basically training you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And so,
in
and
a
I love what you
living.
just, if I can point on what you just said, like,
Yeah.
I, she's at Liberty.
Hmm.
And if that's all, I feel like if that's all it takes for her to go, okay, then, then it's kind of, okay, I'm gathering evidence. And if that's all it takes, then that's okay. Like she could walk away, she could insist. And there's sometimes I go, fine, you don't want a blanket,
Yeah, yeah.
because they probably know more about the weather than we do. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I do struggle with this question. Have we really ruled out pain? Because I'm not sure whether we can say, well, we've definitely ruled out pain all the time, because discomfort can come and go. You could have a twinge some days as a result of, I don't know, sleeping badly, or maybe slightly overdoing it the day before or something, or being in a very specific body posture. Pain could be very, very situational and also related to underlying emotional or nervous system state as well. So I think it is the piece of exercising that two-way communication just as often as you can, really, and then you can keep having the conversation. Once you see stuff, you can't unsee it after that. And it makes it so much richer. You might maybe at first it might be a bit worrying because you notice all of the times where maybe your horse is feeling some degree of unease about something, but it does, I think it makes it so much richer, and we can notice things and address them as well.
Absolutely. I mean, my horses are very expressive, and sometimes it's like, oh, they're not wearing a happy face, but it's like, no, we have to change the model of what it means to be a real life living being in the real world. And I would much rather have them be expressive and operate in that confusing area
Yeah,
than to have
absolutely.
them covering it up and pretending they're okay if they're not. And I think um like we just have to be very careful about what we choose to force or insist on.
Mm,
And I think as time goes by, there are fewer and fewer things that I insist on or for. I mean, I've never been into force, but still, you can force nicely just by going, no, we're doing it. And I'm much more, yeah, careful about that. There's more wiggle room, there's more play in what can happen. I want to tell a story about needles since you're
oh yeah.
an expert on the needle shyness, just for my own, again, not a psychologist, but I'm me and I can tell this story. I really don't like needles. So I am a needle shy person. I've gotten better at it, but I remember in my 30s looking for a new dentist, and the Novocaine would come out, and I can faint very easily. I knew this about myself, so I would make sure I would tell people like, "Hey, I can be weird with needles. Yeah, I've been known to faint." And this one dentist, like he just prepared the needle without like shooting it up in front of me. And, he like did it
Yeah.
with his back turned. He came around the side, put his hands on me and went, there, it's okay. And I'm like, and then it still hurt just as much, but it kind of didn't at the same time. I felt more okay because I'm like, he heard me, he
Yeah.
listened, he heard me and he listened and he changed his behavior and he did something to let me know that was empathetic. That changed everything.
Yes.
So it kept me in the chair and it kept me not bracing because now if I say my usual line to someone, hey, I have a thing about needles, like every time I get blood drawn, I say the same thing. Hey, I'm funny about needles, be gentle with me. I try to
Hmm.
crack a joke. I've been known to faint. And if I don't get a person to person response, it's worse.
Yeah,
And if they
absolutely.
kind of joke with me and they'll say, I got you, girl, and I'm like, okay, like, so the intention, the attitude I think we approach it with, just what you're saying, can make such a difference. And I believe even to horses. I mean, of course, they're feeling the same thing, even if we're not
Hmm.
talking with words to them.
Yeah, it's really important what you said about it kind of hurt the same, but it was also different. And there's definitely pain where we think, well, I'm noticing pain, but I think I'm okay. And then there's pain where it's there's pain and I am in danger. This is not okay.
Right.
And it's absolutely the same with needle shy horses. So sometimes some horses are obviously very extreme, but sometimes all you need to do is just take that slight pause. It might actually only be about 30 seconds. It might seem like a long time, but where they're effectively saying to you by their behavior, I have a thing about needles, they might be saying, I might faint. And if you just go in there, not, maybe even with some physical restraint, right, this is happening now, that is going to have a very different feel and effect on the pain that is involved in a needle than, oh, I see, yeah, you need a minute. I can give you a minute. That's okay. And then the horse thinks, oh my goodness, you're giving me a minute. Oh, it must be, I must be safe here. Sometimes not quite that simple, but yeah,
But it
definitely.
can be. It can be. I mean, I've had that with a horse with a new vet coming in to draw some blood. And same thing. She came in and the horse, and I literally said, it's like, oh, just give me a second. And I asked her to lower her head. I gave her a little, click and treat. And then the vet was like, oh, you do the positive reinforcement. And then should we talk? She's like, oh, I totally get this. And she got excited and was working with me with the timing.
That's
And in
brilliant.
probably 1 minute, literally,
Mm-hmm.
horse was relaxed and she gave the injection. But when she first came in, she came in fast. Sometimes they just want to sneak them in. And I was like, and I had to say, literally, just hang on a second. And it was interesting that the vet, it took me saying something, even though she was actually excited to do it
Mm.
this way, but she wasn't going to say anything. She was just going to do what the most owners expect.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think, hopefully there's other veterinarians listening to this podcast and learning from you, but also as an owner, just know, even if you want to be a good owner and respect the professional, to not be afraid to literally say, hang on a second
Mm-hmm.
and see,
Yeah, and in
see
both
what happens.
directions, the other person is actually most likely going to be pleased that you bring it up. So there may be an expectation of, on the vet's side, uh, I need to get this done as quickly as possible, and the owner would prefer it if I wasn't taking my time. And on the other direction, oh, I can't waste this professional's time. But actually, more often than not, I think both parties would be delighted to work together on that and make it a more pleasant experience. We don't like it when horses don't like us. You go around and
Don't like it when
no,
horses don't like it. There's
no.
your new logo.
Yeah. This is a quick reminder that the Needle Shyness online course starts running live on the 1st of January. For an ethical and effective approach to helping needle-shy horses, go to www.nurturingnatureequine.co.uk/needles.
Yeah. No, I think in so many things in the horse world today, it's like just taking that minute to, when you feel it in your heart of like, hang on, like to maybe just say something and see what happens. And I think if you say something like, hang on, give me a second, and they go, screw you, and shoot them,
Yeah,
then you go, that one's not coming back. I'm getting a new
exactly that.
a new veterinarian, because I have had that happen too, and they have never come back. Yeah, so I think it's the stay in your lane thing we mentioned in the beginning. Like, well, no, because you can't stay in your lane because everything overlaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think that's a brilliant place actually to end, because that we've covered so much ground. I think we could probably talk for hours.
Well, we might just have to do this again, Lily, because it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I love talking to you and yeah, finding the overlaps, and this gives me, hope for the horse world if we can just keep these conversations going. And I think what you're doing really just gets to the heart of, it's just caring for horses. You're a veterinary professional, but I'm a, trainer, teacher, but we're all just hopefully trying to care for horses.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful for your clarifying influence on this, because it's helped majorly. And yeah, means that I've actually been able to present it in ways, because it was all a bit tangled up in my head before. I was doing it, but it was harder to teach it. So yeah, that's incredibly helpful.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's super fun working with professionals like you, because the stuff that you know so well and that is so um, deep in you, it's what I always say, it's like the nose in front of your face. Like, you can't see it for yourself. It takes somebody else to kind of look and go, help pull it out of you and help you realize it. So yeah, this, what you're teaching and offering, needs to be out there. So I'm just thrilled to be a part of that.
Well, thanks very much for the whole podcast episode. Brilliant.
Thank you for being on my podcast. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Vital Horse podcast, where you can find discussions focused on helping horses in ways that combine scientific principles and evidence with compassion and understanding. Do subscribe if this content has rung true for you. To work with me in a way that honours both head and heart, check out my online and in-person offerings at www.nurturingnatureequine.co.uk. If you are facing problems or are trying to answer questions with your horse, remember that physical, mental and emotional well-being are inextricably interconnected, that there is a wisdom to nature and to the body that we can assist, and that cultivating meaningful relationships with our animal companions holds an important key to the well-being of all of us. Deep awareness and a compassionate process will enable us to find sustainable, ethical solutions. See you for the next episode and look forward to working with you too.